What if your career transition isn't taking too long? It's unfolding exactly the way it needs to. In this episode of Beyond the Classroom, former special education teacher Sally Del Llano shares how it took nearly 8 years of planning, saving, and discovering new passions before she was ready to leave the classroom. We talk about bridge jobs, LinkedIn, transferable skills, and why sometimes the messy middle is where you find the path you were meant to take. If you've ever wondered whether you're making progress fast enough, this conversation is one you won't want to miss.
I'm Lisa Harding, ex-EdTech CEO turned certified teacher career coach. It wasn't all that long ago that I was recruiting, interviewing, and hiring teachers for roles in corporate America. Teachers that ended up being some of my all-time best employees. Fast forward through my own career transition, where I left my role as CEO to become a stay-at-home mom, I now work with and empower teachers to transform their lives by turning their once distant career dreams into realities. In this podcast, I give you simple, actionable, step-by-step strategies to help you do the same. If you're a burnt-out teacher or simply need a change and you're looking to create a life you love, you're in the right place, friend. Let's get started.
Hey friends, Lisa here. Welcome back to Beyond the Classroom. Today's episode is part of our Messy Middle series, real conversations with teachers who are actively navigating a career transition. And one thing I think we don't talk about enough in this space is how long this process can actually take. Because so often we see the highlight reel. Someone leaves teaching, lands a new job, and it all looks quick and seamless. But for many teachers, that's not the reality. Today, I'm joined by Sally, a former high school special education teacher who spent nearly 2 decades in the classroom and knew years before she left that something needed to change. But leaving didn't happen overnight. It took time, planning, real-life decisions, and a willingness to keep moving forward even without having everything figured out. And in this conversation, Sally shares what it looked like to take that long road out of the classroom and how she began building her next chapter one step at a time. You'll hear about the moments that helped her gain clarity, how she navigated the uncertainty of starting over, and the practical steps she's taken to move forward, even while still figuring out exactly where she's headed. So if you've ever felt like your transition is taking longer than you expected, or wondered if you're doing something wrong because you're not there yet, this episode is for you. Let's dive in. Well, welcome to the show, Sally.
Thank you for having me, Lisa. I appreciate it.
I'm so excited to learn a bit about your career transition journey and where you are, and just to kind of normalize what I like to call the messy middle of a career transition for our audience. So before we jump into that, maybe just tell us a little bit about your role in the school system and what brought you to a place where you wanted to make a transition.
Great question. So I was a high school special education teacher for 19 years in the same role, same public school. And prior to that, I had been a middle school special education aide for about 4 years. So I was in special education for a long time. And it's interesting because many people who are teachers they set out to become teachers. Certainly not everybody. We're a big workforce, but that is a very typical story, is that a lot of teachers always knew they wanted to be teachers. And that was not me. I didn't come to teaching in that way. Like I, many years ago, got my undergrad in psychology and was sort of like, well, not really sure what direction I want to go in next, but I had worked with adults who had pretty significant disabilities in my undergrad. And so I found a position in that kind of transition time as a special ed aide. And I really liked it and kind of realized that this was a path that was available for me. So that was why I went back for my master's in special education for moderate disabilities and got into it that way. And once I was into it, I was pretty committed to it. and wasn't really thinking about transitioning out of it. But then, say around 2016, I went back a couple years ago and I found this old journal entry that I'd made, and it was September of 2016. It was like right after I'd gone back to school for the year, and I'd written about how I just couldn't keep this pace up forever, and that was 10 years ago now. It was 8 years before I transitioned out. I transitioned out in June of 2024. And so from there, it took a while. I was the primary wage earner in my family for all of those years, actually. And so my husband kind of needed to go through his career transition first. And then little by little, we made a plan for me to exit. But it was really, I want to say, it was building over time. But the real kind of turning point for me came in 2020, because I had been approved to take a year sabbatical leave. Actually, the end of February, like 3 weeks before everything shut down, my approval for sabbatical leave had gone through. And so I spent the year 2020, 2021 just sort of cocooned in this like space of doing all of this research and sabbatical work. And that was when I really realized that I had other skills that I wasn't tapping into within my special ed work. And they were things that I really liked. I loved reading and researching and writing and putting all of these big thoughts and ideas together, and started to feel like maybe it was time for me to really get real about pursuing my path out. So I went back to the classroom in 2021 and spent those next 3 years saving, doing a lot of planning, trying to figure out my exit strategy. And those were really, really tough 3 years. But I did leave and transition out in June 2024, and I did it on good terms with my administration, which was really important to me. I wanted to make sure that I had done that. And so that brings me here.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And just to kind of recap the timeline too, and something I like to point out from your story to the audience is, so many times we'll be on LinkedIn or wherever, and we'll just see people posting like, I got this new job, I left teaching. And sometimes it feels so instant when we're on the other side of the screen and we see people just jumping into new roles. So I think it's so refreshing to hear a real story about how, it took you years of planning, even it seems like it impacted your partner's life as well, having for him to maybe figure out something on that side of the family and then be able to transition you. So thank you for sharing all of that, because sometimes it feels so instant for everyone else. But to really hear what a real life process is like, and then to know you want to leave and then be back in the classroom for an additional 3 years until the summer of 2024. And then I know you found us in the fall of 2024 when you joined the Teacher Career Transition Academy. And you're, based on our previous email conversation, you're doing some part-time work now, but still looking for your permanent home. So could you maybe share with us what you're doing now part-time, and then what you're still looking to find as the next chapter?
Sure. So in January of 2025, actually, I found a position as a foundational reading analyst with the National Council on Teacher Quality, NCTQ. They're a nonprofit, nonpartisan policy research center, and the work that I do for them is contract based. So, but it's been consistent. So I still work for them on a part-time basis. So the work that I do with them is we analyze teacher preparation programs specific to reading. And so we analyze the teacher prep programs that, it's close to 1,000 colleges across the US. And we analyze those to make sure that they are aligned with the science of reading and the science of reading instruction. And so I was able to use my background knowledge from years of special ed experience and doing deep dives into reading instruction, that really benefited me in that position because that was what they were looking for. And so I've been on a team of other analysts, in addition to the syllabus work that we do, analyzing the syllabus for these syllabi, for these different programs. I also read and review the instructional textbooks that are used by professors within these programs. And so we analyze them to ensure that they are also aligned with the science of reading. And then I write reviews for those. And that's sort of, it's very, very interesting, stimulating, and fulfilling work. And I would love to do more of it part-time, or full-time, excuse me. So that's sort of what helped give me my direction towards where I'm headed now, which I'm now in a Master's of Public Policy program, which I did not intend to do necessarily when I set out on this transition. I was like, back in school again, awesome. But I really realized that I loved the process of doing this research, and it feels like it's for a very, very good, beneficial cause. It's helping to move better instruction forward. And so I also realized that there was a bit of a gap in my skills between having like the research methodology and the stats and all this other information, things that I really need in order to take a more leadership role within those kinds of organizations. And so I am now back in school. I took a lot of like upskilling courses. I learned a programming language. Which is something I never thought that I would do. But these are all things, steps that I took, kind of like things that I would explore in order to get to this sort of end goal of like, I want to end up in research. So how do I make that happen without having to commit to a full PhD program? Because I'm in my late 40s. I have a 13-year-old who is awesome and will likely want to go to college himself in a couple of years. So I'm sort of like, all right, well, how do I split the difference with all of this? You know what I mean? I would love to get a PhD in research, but at the same time, it's like, how much can we commit investment wise to this process? So it's been a long process of kind of trying to find this like middle ground. What skills do I need in order to kind of boost myself to that next level?
Oh, I love that. And a few things to point out to the audience. I mean, one thing we talk about in the academy is this concept of a bridge job, and
Yes.
It might not be a full-time job that you were hoping for or this or that, but it sometimes can help people, one, just get out of the classroom for folks that may be in a bad situation. Which doesn't sound like you were in, the situation that I'm thinking of for some people. But sometimes people literally just have to get out right then. So a bridge job is great. It can also be great, which your story showcases, is that you may not have known that this is a path that you love so much, the researching and the analysis. And sounds like when you took the job, you didn't think like, oh, this is my path forever, but you uncovered some interesting aspects of what you like to do and started researching from there. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I mean, being a mom, part-time job, now you're going back for a master's. I mean, any practical tips for the audience on like, how do you balance all of this?
Oh my gosh. It's so funny. One of my running jokes is like, as a special education teacher, I spent years helping others help organize themselves and learn executive functioning skills. And I learned a lot from having to teach it, but now it's sort of like, oh my goodness, you're coming to me for advice. Yeah, I think that so what's at the core of life balance for me is the communication that I have with my husband and my son too. We're a tight little unit, but all the things that I was going through to try to transition out of the field. And I mean, I'm listening to some of your former guests. I can totally relate to like having health issues. I went through a period of mysterious health issues where I went to tons of specialists who were like, we don't know what's wrong with you, Sally. I'm sorry. And a lot of it I think was just stress related, you know. So I went through these periods of time where I needed to get out. And my husband and my son lived that alongside me, you know, they knew. And so as a family, we are constantly in communication about like, okay, so you handle the sports thing, I'll handle the music schedule in terms of my son's, you know, extracurriculars, you know, how do we handle the academics with him? And then how much does my husband work and how much do I work? And letting them know like I have a couple of big papers due this week, you know, and so where can we give and take, I guess is what I'm getting at, if that makes sense. And so, and not everybody is in my situation. I certainly understand and respect that. But I think I mean, I still keep a desk calendar. I couldn't live without it. You know, I have reminders all over my desk, all over my house, you know, ways that I kept myself organized before, those same skills kind of transfer over into this line of work as well.
Thank you for sharing. Yes. And I mean, a transition is just so personal and there's so many differences between everyone, but it's just helpful to hear how real life people are making it happen. And it sounds like having a good communication system with your family at home and finding balance and everyone, you know, working as a family unit to bring like peace and cohesion across everyone.
Yes, right. And we work at it. I don't mean to make it seem like we just poof, there we go. We became awesome communicators. You know, we work very hard to do that. So it's also a process.
One thing over email that we kind of shared back and forth, you mentioned one reason you joined the academy was that it was more of like the how-tos of the job search. And you had been working with a career counselor, but it just wasn't as tactical or hands-on. Can you maybe tell us about that experience and what you found helpful in the academy?
Yes, for sure. So I had been for about a year before I actually left teaching. I had been working with a career counselor, and she was great. We did a lot more of the like strengths inventories, interest inventories, personality assessments. You know, some of that like deeper internal work. So I could kind of try to see myself in terms of somebody or something other than just a teacher. And that was very, very important too, after, you know, the couple decades I've been in working as a teacher. But then it was after the summer after I transitioned and into the fall, it was sort of like, all right, I have a working resume, but it's really not matching what I see posted on job ads, you know, either through LinkedIn or, you know, through a variety of different websites you can go to. And I needed assistance trying to figure out how do I translate teacher speak into business or nonprofit or, you know, just the workforce speak. So, you know what I mean? And I really needed assistance with those practical step by step. The academy gave me a structure, you know, like a step by step process to hear the wonderful, wonderful materials that you have. And some of the meetings I will go to, I think it was Deara. Did I say her name correctly? Deara. She'd be like, all right, so here's a job ad. Here's what or job posting. Here's what you're looking at. All right. You don't want to don't go immediately to like, here's whether or not you're qualified. Set that aside for a minute. Go to what the job is looking for. Pull out those details. What can you do there? What are you interested in? That's the gold. I still remember her saying that goes in my head. And then she gave us a task where it's like, all right, go find 3 job postings that look interesting to you. And I want you to go through this process. I needed to be the student in that way and have somebody who knew what they were talking about. Because for perspective, the last time I'd been in the job market, LinkedIn didn't exist. You know what I mean? So I walked into this whole other culture of finding a job that was not familiar to me at all. And so I needed those, like, stop being afraid of all this extra stuff that, all these other details and like all these things that you think you can't do, Sally. You can do them. You just need somebody to help break it down for you. And that's what the Academy is so effective at doing. And then you bring in so many great, like, people from industry who had been teachers or were very familiar with the teaching system and talked about the jobs that whether it was a just instructional designer or whether it's like in operations and whether it's in enablements and whether I'm like, I just had no idea that all these things existed, so that the internal work I needed to do was very important, but then I also needed to understand how to, with that information I gained, how do I then apply it within this bigger world that's kind of foreign to me right now? Does that make sense?
Yes, and thank you for sharing that. Definitely appreciate that, and the shout out to some of our coaches for the amazing work that they do in there. And you bring up LinkedIn, which I think is interesting because I feel like with the teachers we work with, a very common thing is that not a lot of them are on LinkedIn prior to realizing they want to make a career transition. It's just not a platform that educators ever went to, or like you said, the last time you were in the job market, it wasn't a thing either. So how have you learned to navigate LinkedIn? And I know you're on LinkedIn now, and maybe just for someone intimidated by LinkedIn, what advice could you share about your experience?
I think it's important to give yourself some grace as you're learning it, because, and this is obviously for people who are already been on LinkedIn and use it well, like, kudos to you. That's awesome. I'm so envious because it's been a real trial for me. And I'm now at a point where I feel like I get it more. But it can be very, very overwhelming because it's like connecting with people, and then it's groups you can be a part of, and then there are job postings, and then there are companies you can follow, and then there are people you can follow. And it's sort of like, well, if you compare it to a social media platform like Facebook, that's a totally different animal and what it is you should be saying on LinkedIn versus what you like say or post about on Facebook, So it's learning all these sort of hidden rules. And I did a lot of that just kind of by observation at first, starting out with a very small group of people that I connected with. And I did connect with some former teachers or educators and some administrators, that I had worked with for years. But I tried especially hard to try to branch out and connect with people in different fields as well, because that is how you kind of work your way slowly and navigate through LinkedIn, is finding those groups of people where you're looking to get a job in this area, or narrow it down to 2 or 3 areas you're looking to get a job in those fields. It's better that I'm not only connected with other teachers, because then I'm just going to find more roles for teachers. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
And so trying to figure that part out, giving yourself time to figure that part out. And then I signed up for like email alerts for different roles, and that just sort of became a mess after a while. I had to shut those off because what a content analyst is amazing. There's this is one of the roles that I posted that, like, sure, send me emails for content analysts. And it's sort of like, I would get all of these different emails or alerts that, like, there is something similar to a content analyst in this field. And it's like, that's not at all a job I'm interested in. And so it's an imperfect kind of, weeding or fishing expedition, I guess you might say. So for a while, I just shut it all down. But it was important for me to do that because I got better at knowing how to filter it and knowing what I was looking for. Like, don't put in content analyst, Sally. You're going to get a wide net. Be much more specific about what it is you're looking for, And it's been a far better resource for me since I've learned how to do that.
Well, that's great. And those are wonderful tips to share. One thing that stood out is, and I know people call it social media, but I hate calling LinkedIn social media,
Yes,
because
I know.
as you mentioned, it is very different. I mean, we all call it that. It's like a professional networking site. I also love that you called out, the alerts that you can set up, which are a double-edged sword because they can be very helpful, or you can realize that you are spinning your wheels and spending so much time sifting through that. And so kudos to you for shutting that down, and giving your brain time to think about other things rather than sifting through all of that. So thank you for sharing those practical tips. As we kind of round out our episode today, just wondering, any last minute advice or words of wisdom to teachers that are maybe in the messy middle, or maybe even those that are just thinking about making a transition?
I have so many words of wisdom to share, and I'm glad you brought up the subject of this podcast again, which is that it's in the messy middle, which I feel as though I'm kind of coming out of a little bit more. But I mean, it's been a long middle for me, and that's been okay. It's been totally fine. We've managed to make it work. And I make a fraction of what I used to. That is true. But with enough time and planning and foresight and really kind of assessing what it is I need, that was really what gave me back my freedom, so to speak. And that was what I guess because as I was leaving teaching, many others who I had taught with for the same amount of time, who were around my age-ish, were saying to me, like, it's awesome, it's brave, you're leaving. What could I do? I didn't even know what I could do. I was like, to be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure either, but I know that we all have a lot of really good working years left in us. And to spend time feeling stuck somewhere, it's a loss of hope, a loss of hope for like possibility and what else could be out there for you. People are loaded with potential in so many different areas. And I'm not a motivational speaker by trade. I apologize. I don't mean it to come across that way at all. That feeling of stuckness, like I am trapped here. For me, there was no worse feeling. And I had this quote a friend of mine posted on on Facebook, which I don't recommend going there for life advice necessarily. But she posted this quote that just said, "Choose your heart." And I wrote that on my desk calendar, and I write it down every month, because the reality is that transitioning out of this field, or something you've been in for a long time, yes, it's hard. It's unknown. It's not like I was ready to leave teaching, but now it's the fear of like, but am I ever going to be able to make the kind of money that I did before? Because by the time I left, I was making a pretty good salary. Am I going to be able to support my family? Am I going to be useful in the way that I was before? Those are all unknowns, and that is hard. But the flip side is that staying in teaching was also going to be hard. I knew what kind of hard that was. And it became increasingly unsustainable. And so I think that people just, if I could bestow any real words of wisdom to, my fellow former teaching colleagues, like, it's a big world out there. It's loaded with possibilities, and so are you. You have potential in things that you haven't really even tapped into yet, likely. And we have our problems as a nation, like all others do, but we are still the wealthiest, most economically free place in the world. Like, if we're going to find another career, this is the place to do it. Use what you can to try to navigate yourself out of it, to try to unlock yourself from feeling stuck. I feel like I rambled there a little bit. I'm sorry.
No, I love it. And it was just so honest and so real. And I know so many teachers are probably shaking their heads saying, yeah, that feels like me. That sounds like exactly what I needed to hear today. So Sally, thank you so much for joining us, sharing your messy middle. And we are wishing you success as you head out of the messy middle and into your next chapter.
Thank you very much for having me, and good luck to your audience. You should join the Academy. The resources are golden.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Such a thoughtful and honest conversation. And I hope this gave you a clearer picture of what the messy middle can really look like. Because as Sally shared, this process doesn't always happen quickly. Sometimes it takes time, planning, adjusting, and figuring things out as you go. And that doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. In fact, it might mean you're doing it in a way that actually works for your life. One of the biggest takeaways from Sally's story is that there's no one right timeline for a career transition. You don't have to rush it. You don't have to have everything figured out. You just have to keep taking the next step. And if you're in that place right now, feeling like it's taking longer than you expected, or wondering if you should be further along, just know that you're not alone in that. Progress doesn't always look fast, but it is still progress. And if you're looking for support as you navigate your own transition, that's exactly what we're here to help you with inside the Teacher Career Transition Academy. We help you break this process down into clear, manageable steps so you can build clarity, confidence, and momentum at your own pace. You can find more information in the show notes. And as always, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with a teacher who might need to hear it. Remember, friends, the journey is just the beginning. Embrace the adventure.